Jungkook's Spotify success is not a coincidence or a fleeting trend. It is the culmination of years of preparation, artistry, and timing that align perfectly with the global shifts in how music is consumed. The impossible feat he has just accomplished speaks to both the sheer magnitude of his fanbase and the undeniable quality of his music. For a K-pop idol to dominate Spotify at such a scale, breaking through cultural, linguistic, and market barriers, was once considered an uphill battle. Spotify, historically dominated by Western acts, seemed impenetrable for non-English-speaking artists. Yet Jungkook has stood on the very top not as a borrowed star of BTS's fame, but as a solo artist carving his own space. To understand why his achievement is considered impossible, one must look closely at the mechanics of the platform itself. Spotify's global reach spans hundreds of millions of users, with playlists curated algorithmically to prioritize Western artists. Competition is fierce, not only from pop juggernauts like Taylor Swift, Drake, and The Weeknd, but also from the rising wave of Latin music led by artists like Bad Bunny. Amidst this landscape, Jungkook managed to cut through, reaching listeners far beyond the K-pop community. His streams aren't just fan-driven, they're proof that his songs have mass appeal, catching the ears of casual listeners who had never interacted with BTS or Korean music before. That is why the word impossible feels fitting. He didn't just succeed in familiar markets, he expanded into spaces previously closed off to K-pop acts. Part of this achievement lies in Jungkook's decision to embrace a global pop sound while still maintaining his identity. His English-language singles gave him an entry point into the Western-dominated charts, but the soul, delivery, and emotion in his music reflect who he is as an artist from Korea. Unlike many solo ventures that risk losing individuality in pursuit of commercial viability, Jungkook managed to balance both worlds. Songs like 7, Standing Next to You, and Never Let Go showcase his versatility. He can deliver upbeat anthems fit for summer playlists, heartfelt ballads that resonate emotionally, and experimental tracks that prove he isn't afraid to evolve. What magnifies his Spotify triumph is timing. The music industry has entered a new streaming-driven era where platforms like Spotify dictate not only what people listen to but also how songs are discovered. Viral TikTok clips, playlist placements, and algorithmic boosts often determine whether a song lives or dies in the digital world. For Jungkook to rise above this noise and dominate without relying solely on virality is extraordinary. His charting songs stayed on top not because of fleeting trends, but because people returned to listen again and again. Longevity on Spotify is far harder to achieve than a temporary spike, and this is where Jungkook's artistry truly shines. Another critical layer to his achievement is cultural representation. When BTS first broke into the Western market, many critics assumed it was a one-time anomaly. They believed the group's success was too tied to fan dedication and wouldn't translate into sustained mainstream presence. Jungkook's solo Spotify performance dismantles that outdated perception. His numbers prove that K-pop artists are not confined to niche markets but can sit at the same table as the world's biggest pop stars. The impossible has been redefined. It is no longer about whether a K-pop act can succeed individually, but about how far they can go once they're given the chance. The global reach of Jungkook's Spotify success cannot be overstated. He isn't just charting in South Korea or Japan. His music tops charts in the US, Europe, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and beyond. This global resonance is rare even for Western stars. Few artists manage to dominate across multiple continents simultaneously, and yet Jungkook's streaming numbers prove that his songs speak a universal language. Whether it is the upbeat rhythm of 7 or the emotional pull of Never Let Go, his music taps into something deeply human, transcending borders and languages. One must also acknowledge the emotional weight carried by this achievement. Jungkook has been open about his personal struggles with confidence, pressure, and expectations as the youngest member of BTS. For years, he stood in the shadow of being the golden Maknae, praised for his talent but always compared to the group's collective success. Spotify now stands as the stage where he has stepped into his own spotlight. This isn't just about streams, it's about identity, independence, and self-definition. Fans who have followed him since BTS's early days feel the emotional resonance of this milestone. It symbolizes growth, maturity, and proof that his artistry holds its own power. From a broader perspective, Jungkook's Spotify success reshapes how the industry views K-pop soloists. While BTS as a group has always been a phenomenon, their individual ventures are now rewriting the industry's rules. Jungkook's dominance shows that a K-pop idol doesn't need to detach from their origins to succeed. Instead, they can embrace their heritage while navigating global markets, merging cultures in a way that appeals to millions. His Spotify streams are more than numbers, they are markers of cultural exchange, of barriers falling, and of music proving its universality once again. It's also worth noting how his Spotify impact is forcing industry giants to reevaluate strategies. Record labels, marketing agencies, and playlist curators now see undeniable evidence that Jungkook's name commands global attention. The old belief that Asian artists couldn't sustain Western streaming dominance has been shattered. Jungkook is not merely participating in the global market, he is leading it. This in itself is what makes the impossible truly possible. He isn't following in someone else's footsteps, he is setting a path for others to follow. One of the most jaw-dropping feats is Jungkook's rapid entry into Spotify's billion streams club. For a solo artist, reaching a billion streams on a single song is already considered extraordinary. It requires consistency, global listenership, and long-term replay value. Jungkook's hit single 7 didn't just enter this elite category, it did so at record speed. Industry analysts point out that it reached the milestone faster than songs by long-established Western stars. What's remarkable is that this wasn't a case of a one-time viral hit. 7 showed endurance, staying on global playlists and maintaining listener interest months after its release. For years, the narrative surrounding non-Western acts was that their success relied too heavily on initial fan enthusiasm, leading to a strong debut but sharp decline afterward. Jungkook's numbers demolished that stereotype. His songs didn't collapse after their debut hype, they sustained streams across diverse markets. Spotify's data shows a wide demographic distribution, from teens in Southeast Asia to listeners in Europe and Latin America, indicating that his music has penetrated mainstream habits rather than being confined to fandom-driven spikes. Another impossible record Jungkook shattered lies in his Spotify listener base. At his peak, he recorded tens of millions of monthly listeners, putting him in the same bracket as top global artists like Taylor Swift, Drake, and The Weeknd. For context, BTS as a group had already achieved impressive Spotify numbers, but soloists from K-pop rarely managed to approach such levels. Jungkook became the first Korean soloist to cross thresholds once thought untouchable. The daily listener surge was even more striking. Spotify's daily charts reflected Jungkook competing directly with Western megastars. For an artist who comes from a non-English background, this was unprecedented. Industry insiders admitted that even record labels had underestimated his reach. Analysts who once dismissed K-pop solo ventures as niche had to reevaluate, acknowledging that Jungkook's presence was commanding respect on par with the world's most streamed musicians. In the music industry, debut numbers are often inflated by hype and fandom mobilization. What separates temporary success from long-term dominance is chart consistency. Jungkook Standing Next to You and Never Let Go proved that his Spotify power wasn't confined to a single track. They charted consistently across weeks, sometimes even months, despite intense competition from Western and Latin artists who had the advantage of language familiarity and established market roots. Spotify's algorithms reward songs that maintain replay value across casual listeners. Unlike traditional album sales that can be fan-driven, streams depend on whether people return to a song repeatedly. The fact that Jungkook's discography has achieved this across multiple tracks is groundbreaking. It suggests that his artistry appeals beyond his loyal fanbase, carving out a wider cultural impact. What makes Jungkook's Spotify milestones even more impossible is who he has surpassed in the process. Names like Justin Bieber, Ed Sheeran, and Shawn Mendes have long dominated streaming platforms due to their early embrace of digital-first releases. Jungkook, despite launching his solo career later in the streaming era, managed to outpace some of their records in terms of speed to milestones and overall global spread. This comparative lens is important. While Western media often highlights competition between Western stars, Jungkook's rise forces the conversation to shift. He is no longer a K-pop act trying to break into the global market. He is a global act competing at the same level. To surpass icons who have built their careers around Spotify dominance proves that his artistry isn't tied to novelty, it's about sustained relevance. Of course, Jungkook's fanbase, the ARMY, cannot be overlooked. Their dedication is legendary, capable of mobilizing globally to amplify his music. But the remarkable part of Jungkook's Spotify success is how far it extends beyond his fandom. Analysts reviewing Spotify data highlight the unusually high number of first-time listeners engaging with his tracks. This metric indicates that non-fans, casual listeners, and even those unfamiliar with BTS were drawn to his music. This is where the impossible nature of his success lies. K-pop fandoms are known for their power, but Jungkook managed to expand past those boundaries. His music isn't confined to niche playlists, it lives comfortably in mainstream Spotify curated lists alongside American and Latin stars. It is here that his breakthrough feels revolutionary, as he demonstrates that K-pop soloists are not limited to fan-centric success stories. The impact of Jungkook's Spotify dominance ripples far beyond his personal career. Record labels and streaming experts are recalibrating strategies for Asian artists entering the global market. Before Jungkook, there was skepticism about investing heavily in promoting non-English soloists to Western audiences. Now, his records prove that not only is it viable, but it can also be game-changing. Streaming success is closely tied to business opportunities. Endorsements, festival invitations, radio airplay, and cross-industry collaborations. Jungkook's Spotify data strengthens his positioning in all these areas. When a brand or event organizer sees an artist consistently pulling in global streams across continents, they recognize the commercial value. This is why his Spotify dominance is more than an artistic milestone, it is an economic one. The word impossible in this context refers to the barriers Jungkook has overcome. Language, geography, and industry bias were once considered immovable obstacles for K-pop soloists. Spotify was particularly resistant terrain because it reflected the tastes of casual listeners outside the fandom bubble. For Jungkook to not only break into that system, but dominate, it redefines what is possible for global artists moving forward. His journey on Spotify sets new precedents. No longer can industry experts claim that non-English acts have limited staying power. No longer can critics dismiss K-pop success as purely fan-driven without mainstream appeal. Jungkook's records dismantle these myths and rebuild them with a new narrative. Global music is no longer about where you come from, it's about how powerfully your artistry resonates. When future historians of the music industry look back at the 2020s, Jungkook's Spotify dominance will likely stand as a turning point. Much like how the Beatles' invasion in the 1960s or Michael Jackson's dominance in the 1980s reshaped global pop culture, Jungkook's era of breaking digital barriers represents a moment of cultural shift. His achievements show that streaming platforms are not just dominated by Western acts anymore. The world has changed, and audiences are more open than ever to diversity in sound, style, and origin. In this sense, Jungkook's Spotify milestone is not merely personal, it is historical. It represents a broader shift in the global music order, one that acknowledges Asia not just as a consumer market but as a source of leading talent. The impossible has been done, and it has been done by a young artist who only a decade ago was training in Seoul with dreams far smaller than this global reality. The most common comparison in Western media has been between Jungkook and Justin Bieber. Both artists emerged as prodigies at a young age, both captured global audiences with vocal talent and charisma, and both became cultural icons for their generation. On Spotify, Bieber has long held dominance with billions of streams across multiple tracks. Yet Jungkook's speed to milestones has begun to challenge Bieber's records, signaling a new era. For instance, Bieber's early tracks like Sorry and Love Yourself cemented his reputation as a streaming juggernaut. Jungkook, however, reached similar heights with fewer releases. This efficiency, achieving comparable streaming milestones with a smaller catalog, illustrates the intensity of his global impact. While Bieber built his Spotify legacy over a decade, Jungkook has done it in a fraction of the time. That acceleration is what industry experts call impossible, because it breaks the natural progression expected for soloists. Taylor Swift's streaming dominance is legendary, especially with her re-recordings and massive global tour boosting her catalog. She represents the pinnacle of fan-driven dedication mixed with mainstream acceptance. Jungkook's Spotify success does not eclipse Swift, but the comparisons highlight something significant: he operates within the same global conversation. This is no small feat. Historically, female Western pop stars like Swift, Adele, or Beyoncé dominated the streaming charts alongside select male counterparts like Drake or The Weeknd. For a Korean soloist to appear in the same league disrupts the narrative of Western exclusivity. Jungkook's presence on Spotify's global chart signals inclusivity in spaces once reserved for a narrow pool of artists. One of the fiercest competitors in recent years has been Bad Bunny, whose Latin hits dominate Spotify with record-breaking consistency. His music resonates across Spanish-speaking markets and beyond, symbolizing how non-English acts can rule global charts. Jungkook's trajectory mirrors this in a striking way. While Bad Bunny opened the door for non-English acts to dominate Spotify, Jungkook expands that possibility further, representing Asia in the global streaming landscape. Comparisons between the two show both differences and parallels. Bad Bunny's success comes from cultural dominance in Latin America spreading outward, while Jungkook stems from a globalized fanbase spreading inward to local markets. Yet both artists prove that the era of Western exclusivity is over. Spotify is no longer bound by language, it rewards universal resonance. One of the strongest indicators of streaming dominance is longevity. The Weeknd's Blinding Lights remains one of the most streamed songs in Spotify history, a testament to replay value and enduring popularity. Jungkook's 7 has yet to match that level of historical staying power, but its trajectory suggests long-term potential. Industry watchers note that Jungkook's catalog, though relatively small, has shown consistency in maintaining streaming power beyond initial hype. If his future releases continue this pattern, he could join the ranks of artists known for catalog longevity. What is striking is how quickly he has entered this conversation. Normally, artists require multiple albums and years of releases to prove durability. Jungkook, with only a handful of solo tracks, has already positioned himself in discussions about long-term Spotify relevance. Within BTS itself, comparisons between solo achievements are inevitable. RM, J-Hope, Jimin, Suga, V, and Jin have all pursued solo projects, each showcasing unique artistry. Jungkook's Spotify numbers, however, are in a league of their own. While other members have achieved respectable streams, none have rivaled Jungkook's global domination on the platform. This does not diminish the others' artistry. In fact, their individual projects highlight the group's diversity. But from a purely statistical perspective, Jungkook's Spotify dominance establishes him as the most commercially impactful BTS soloist. This positioning may influence how industry insiders and the media frame his long-term career, with some labeling him as the group's breakout global solo superstar. Some may argue that comparisons are unnecessary, that Jungkook's success should stand on its own. Yet in the competitive ecosystem of Spotify, comparisons are the very measure of impact. Charts are, by nature, relative. They reveal who dominates, who maintains, and who fades. By placing Jungkook alongside global icons, the scope of his achievement becomes clearer. He is not just another soloist succeeding because of his group's fame. He is a contender reshaping the hierarchy of global streaming. His presence in the same league as Bieber, Swift, Bad Bunny, and The Weeknd confirms that Spotify's impossible barrier for Asian artists has been broken.